But number two, Ukraine would have never happened. It would have never happened, Ukraine, Russia. But the number of people that are being killed, soldiers, young, beautiful soldiers, hundreds of thousands of people are being killed. And, you know, it's very interesting. It's level, totally level. The battlefield's totally level. You know what's happening? Yeah. The only thing that stops a bullet, you know what it is a body, a human body. And the people that are being killed, hundreds of thousands on both sides. Russia's lost probably 500,000. Ukraine's lost higher than they say, probably 400,000. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of bodies laying all over fields. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, and it should have never been allowed to happen. Biden should have been able to stop it.
So that was important because you couple it with the tweet that or Truth or whatever he put out on Truth Social, where he called for, quote, an immediate ceasefire. Also, let's take, since Trump is now the president-elect and he's probably getting intelligence numbers, just so you're aware, he said 400,000. Just yesterday, President Zelensky claimed that the total death toll in Ukraine was 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers who had been killed. So yeah, literally add another zero on top of that number for what the reality is. But it does show that this is going to be very difficult because what did Jeremy say in our interview? If I'm Iran and I just watch this, I'm accelerating my nuclear bomb, right? For preservation of the regime. That's the number one lesson North Korea took away from Libya. If you're Russia and you're looking at this, you just had a prestige hit, you know, in terms of your ally going down, you're embroiled in this war. We already learned from a Russian oligarch that the current quote unquote peace proposal on the table, which would mean, or at least from Zelensky, in terms of NATO membership in exchange for, recognition of some territory lost even of that, the oligarch was like, no, Putin would not take that. So they have a mess on their hands, like absolutely. Yeah. In terms of the ceasefire and all of that, another piece of news that came out of this interview, which is really important, is Trump said he has not spoken to Putin since he became the president-elect. But now he's spoken with Zelensky twice. They had a phone call and they got cozy in the Elysee Palace, I'm sure by design by President Macron, putting him front and center and brokering some meeting there with Zelensky. So there are a lot of open questions about which way this goes. Remember, Mike Waltz and Keith Kellogg have both floated two separate theories of how they would force Putin to the negotiating table, which involves escalating the war in Ukraine. So already we have, look, it's easy to say, I'll have it done by the time I take office. Actually getting there, it's just like the Middle East. It's going to be a tough road.
Well, that was my major takeaway from his comments there is he still falls back on this, well, it wouldn't have happened if I was there. And it's like okay, that was fine for the campaign. Right. You know, people kind of bought that and what you were selling. But now you're about to be in that office and we are where we are. So what now? And you're right, the most consistent indications we've gotten from his advisors are that his plan is basically this like escalate to de-escalate. I think you're right to read into the fact that he's always liked Zelensky, meeting with Zelensky multiple times, and Russia maybe not in such a mood to negotiate given the prestige blow that they just took. So anyway, always interesting to hear what he has to say, but by and large, it's just like, well, we'll see what he does when he gets in there because he says all kinds of things all the time.
Yeah, he says all kinds of things all the time. Can we put D4, please, on the screen? This is what I was referencing. He says they have ridiculously lost 400,000 soldiers, many more civilians. There should be an immediate ceasefire and negotiations should begin. Too many lives are needlessly wasted, too many families destroyed. I mean, look, I think the sentiment is great. It's like you said, though, it's like, well, were your advisors speaking for you? Were they speaking on behalf of themselves? What do you actually think? What are you going to push to happen? And this will, something I talked a lot about on the Lex Friedman podcast was Trump believed previously under John Bolton. He said on the Joe Rogan show, he was like, well, what I do is I hire these people who make me look more reasonable and who are scary. And it's like, okay, that's great. But, while you're in the Oval Office dealing with tax reform, immigration, or any of these other things, they have a full-time job where they're running the administration. And they are running and presenting options and making all of these decisions that have nothing to do with you. And if those people have an ideology that's different than you literally, by definition, cannot spend all of your attention focused on this. You're lucky as the American president if you get to spend 25% of your time on foreign policy.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
you're lucky if that happens.
He's very malleable. Right. Yeah, he's very easily flattered and manipulated. Right. And I mean, that's not, that's not to take the blame off of his shoulders. That's just a reality that it matters a lot who he surrounds himself with. And I think at this point, it's very likely that he would have to really pressure Zelensky into taking a deal that in no way is Zelensky going to want to take in order to get Russia to consider coming to the table with them. And so is he going to be willing to apply that pressure? Because what indication we're getting is that instead what he wants to do is say, we're going to give Zelensky everything he wants. What was it? Seb Gorka who said, what Biden gave him is going to be peanuts compared to what Trump is going to promise to give him.
Again, I have no idea if any of this is true or not. A lot of these guys are just bullshitting on their radio shows too, if we're all being honest, right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, were they talking themselves? They talk for Trump. At least one good thing is that Trump hates when other people speak for him. So it's one of those where hopefully he'll put them in his place, but we'll see, man. It's a big question mark, and the potential for an absolute catastrophic mess remains on the table. Trump was also asked about immigration policy and deportation. Let's take a listen.
4 million families in America who have mixed immigration status. So I'm talking about parents who might be here illegally, but the kids are here legally. Your borders are
You're talking about separation?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are two aspects to this. Your border czar, Tom Homan, said they can be deported together. Correct. Is that the plan?
Well, that way you keep well, I don't want to be breaking up families. So the only way you don't break up the family is you keep them together and you have to send them all back.
Even kids who are here legally?
Well, what you're going to do if they want to stay with the father? Look, we have to have rules and regulations. You can always find something out like, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. I'll tell you what's going to be horrible. When we take a wonderful young woman who's with a criminal and they show the woman, and she could stay by the law, but they show the woman being taken out, or they want her out, and your cameras are focused on her as she's crying, as she's being taken out of our country, and then the public turns against us. But we have to do our job.
So that definitely shows that they're still talking a lot about what quote-unquote mass deportation and all of that will look like. Tom Homan has talked about that before, but I just keep coming back to the reality of it. Like, they barely have enough resources to even deport criminals. Like, the idea that there is going to be, unless Congress gives, I don't know, 10, 20, 50 billion, to ICE, which I don't see happening, especially with the current makeup of the Republican Senate. And you've got guys who are in swing districts or elsewhere who are going to look out for it. So anyway, we'll see. That's how they're talking. But this is, again, like a big question mark to me.
The comments to me were also very revealing because they really showed
about PR too.
That he understood that the images that came out last time were incredibly damaging. I mean, he said the public turns against you.
Right.
And so he realizes the way that these images can be extremely potent and very difficult in spite of the rhetoric that he used on the campaign. The other thing that was noteworthy to me in this interview is he got asked about birthright citizenship, which is in the Constitution. He says he wants to end birthright citizenship using an executive order. You certainly cannot do that. There is some debate.
I was going to say, let me give the case.
There is some debate that you could, that you could pass legislation. Because what is the language? It says, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And so there's some people who say, you can legislate what exactly that means. That's a debate for the courts. Possible, but you can't do it through an executive order as far as I know.
Here's the debate. It says, here's the section from the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States, of the state wherein they reside. Naturalized citizens, subject, are citizens thereof. So the idea is that if you're here illegally and you have a child in the United States, that because you are an illegal immigrant and you're not here under legal jurisdiction, that would not apply. So when they say end birthright citizenship, it's specifically about people who are not legally in the United States, which, look, objectively, that's crazy. If you're here illegally, you get to then just have a baby and your baby is a U.S. citizen? Crazy. I mean, sure, should it apply to green cards or anybody else? Fine, that's totally fine. That's what the executive order would say. But it will be a huge constitutional question. I mean, there's no issue about it. Because as it's written, I mean, I could see it going multiple ways. Like, I think that Clarence Thomas, Alito, you know, maybe and a few other, but somebody like Justice Gorsuch or any of those other, they would easily side.
But what I've seen though is not that is even from conservatives who support this was not that you could do it through executive order. It was that, we could pass legislation to define what it means to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof and change those parameters. Maybe, I don't know. That's what could go through the